everybody, and welcome to another exciting, fun-filled, expeditious episode of Radiorama, where, as the name implies, I show you how to work on radios. Sometimes televisions, sometimes stereos. You never know. And today we have a bizarre one. This came in from an estate about 3 weeks ago. It's a Crossley musical chef. That's what it says, anyway. Model F5TWE. And sorry about that. It's past gas. I'm having a cold right now, so I'm not feeling that great. I didn't really think much of it. When we got it in, I was like, okay, I'm not sure why it's called a musical chef. Maybe it's a kitchen radio. And then I put it in my truck. When I put it down, it made this noise. Like a dinging noise. It was like there's a bell in there. Like, what could that possibly be? It's when I discovered this has an egg timer on one side. So, well, see if it'll go off. There it is. So, I guess the idea why it's a musical chef, you could be listening to the radio and, have a timer for the kitchen. I've never seen a radio with an egg timer in it before. Other than that, there's nothing that remarkable about the radio. It's a 5-tube All-American 5. I'm guessing it's post-1955 or thereabouts because it's got the civil defense markers on the dial here. These little triangular things. Working condition is unknown. Let's go ahead and fire it up and see what happens. Most of the time these guys have blown electrolytic capacitors and they will hum. And so far nothing.
Right now, is that what it is? I'm terrible on the royal family. I got nothing on this.
I am too, yeah.
Who is?
It does work, but you can hear that hum. The electrolytics are on their way out. That's the good news. That means there's no problems to solve per se. The radio works. We're just going to be doing a general overhaul here. The finish is in really good shape. I'm going to leave it as is. I know white radios are kind of boring, but I'm going to leave it like that. It looks like we have 5 tubes with a 35W4 rectifier, 50C5 output, 3-section 12AT6, and then 12BE6 and 12BD6. I'm assuming D6 is similar to A6. I'm not sure what D6 is supposed to mean. I'm not a tube expert. So the first thing first will be to disassemble. Put the knobs in the case away for safekeeping and see what's going on inside. Alright, so here's the back removed. Here is the timer mechanism stuck to the side. We're going to have to take this out to get the chassis out, which is not a big deal. It's just held in with these 2 little screws here. These antenna loops also tend to be problematic because they're glued in, or stamped in and glued in, and then they tend to come loose. So you got to be real careful. They're real easy to break. Again, like, I'm sorry I have a cold right now, so I'm a little, I don't know, not good sounding. This is the tuning condenser. It is a 2-gang typical tuning condenser. There's nothing amazing about the radio. Again, it's a very typical All-American 5 design. They made millions of these things. They all followed the same basic but ingeniously simple and effective design. It looks like so far I'm seeing nothing but Crossley tubes in here, so it makes me wonder, did it get used a whole lot? Maybe it wasn't singing away in the kitchen. Usually when I see a radio that was used in the kitchen, they're filthy because they were next to people cooking greasy, grimy things, and they'd get the food all over the radio, or the grease and the whatever will get all over it. This one looks very clean, so maybe it was never in a kitchen. I'm going to take the bell out and observe the way it goes in. In fact, I think what I'm going to do is mark a little arrow right here that shows point the bell up this way. And then we'll remove the 3 or 4 screws that hold the chassis in. Alright, well, the chassis is now removed, and now I'm going to, before I start on anything, what I want to do is remove all of this yellow stuff that's on the chassis. And what is that, you ask? It's cadmium salt. It's essentially what happens when cadmium plating corrodes. And since it's loose, I do not want to inhale any of it because it's a possible carcinogen. So I'm going to use a wet rag to wipe all of it off and then go wash my hands and then come back, and then we will start the restoration process. Okay, so I feel better now. The loose cadmium is gone. So let's flip it over. This is a weird design. You got a speaker mounted in the front like this. over the top of the chassis. And we have not much going on. We have 3 paper caps. Yes, these are paper caps. They are in ceramic tubes, but inside is paper, sealed with wax. So they will leak just as badly as their paper-bodied cousins. So they all need to be replaced. Values are written on here, 0.047 microfarads at 400 volts maximum. These two are probably the same value. They look like they're the same size. 0.068. And then we have these electrolytics here. I don't think it's been worked on. I think this is all original. We've got a 50 microfarad and a 30 microfarad. And then the black is common. Man, these colors have faded so much. Well, I know the common negative cannot be going to one of the IF transformers, so that means this is our ground, which makes sense, I guess. But what I tend to do first is replace the electrolytics and make sure it works. Still works, rather. And then proceed with the rest of the cap replacement. It is a sort of boring job. There's not as much to replace on this one, so it's going to be a quickie. But still, I'm glad at least I got the capacitors out from underneath the speaker. I've worked on some of these sets where you have to take the speaker out, but you don't have to do it on this one. Alright, I do want to point out something before I get carried away, which is this is the most important cap in the radio. And the reason I say that is because one end of this goes to chassis ground, literally the metal case. Because the way that these transformerless sets work is, imagine that you have a whole bunch of old Christmas lights. And each bulb might be 6 volts, but if you run them all together, you need 120 volts to run it, right? You follow me? The only problem is with doing that with a radio, one end goes to chassis, and that's subsequently the ground back to the main. But running current directly from the cord, like having the cord go to chassis, would mean this would be hot, real hot. Like anything that could squeeze out of your outlet is going to go to this. So we can reduce that amount of juice getting to the chassis by putting a capacitor in between the line and ground. So they weren't stupid back then. They knew that it was critical to do that, but didn't understand the criticality when it comes to how little it takes to cause a person's heart to fibrillate. So they found later it's like something like 5 microamperes. I cannot remember the term, so don't take my advice as the word or whatever. But basically, lowered the amount of current that can get to the chassis to the user. So this is the wrong value. It's a little too high. So we're going to replace that with one of these X2, Y2 cross-the-line safety caps, and it's rated at 0.01. This cap is probably like 0.68 or something like that. So this will be, yeah, 0.68. So this will be a little over 6 times less current potential than this guy. You know, that doesn't mean you won't get, you know, a snap or anything. Like the other day I was working on one of these and I'd already replaced the safety cap and I was in my sandals, and it'd been hot out here, so I was kind of sweaty, and I was standing on the cement floor and I touched the chassis. I got a little bit of a tingle. Now granted, if it had been a true hot chassis, I would have gotten the crap shocked out of me. So it's important to replace those guys. Alright, so I did replace the safety cap and 2 caps that are in the vicinity of where the electrolytics need to go. That way I cleaned out a little room. And this is sometimes where you need to get creative. So we have the blue lead here, and then we go see where the common negative goes. It goes through here to this location right here. So both negatives, which is a stripe on the modern electrolytic, need to go to ground, and the others automatically go to positive. So what you need to do is figure out a way to attach them so they're cinched up as close as possible. So you don't want cap leads to wiggle around. Looks like, how close is this to that? I think I might be able to actually just bridge one of them directly from here to there. Maybe get this capacitor out of the way. And the other, I had this large red wire. So maybe I can attach the red wire to this negative lead, shared common. And then they should fit in there quite nicely. Okay, we still got all the capacitors replaced here. It's a straightforward job, so let's test it and make sure it still works. So we got it plugged in. I see the filament start to come up. Let me straighten these up a little bit. Well, our volume pot is pretty dirty on this, so I need to clean it. Need to get some cleaner. Also known as WD-40. Alright, let's see, where's... Yeah, you can tell. Huh. So clean that volume control out. It's probably got a bunch of crap in it. The other possibility is either one of the tube sockets is loose. Interesting. So, volume is poor. Could be a loose tube. I'm going to wiggle the tubes. I can't do this one-handed. So the problem was these wires for the speaker was touching. Well, now I can't make it do it, but that was the problem. Okay, well, we do have volume restored, but there's a lot of crap happening between the stations. Hear that? That is the sound of either cat whiskers or dust in the tuning condenser. So I use those little cut-up strips of business cards. I'm just going to kind of get in between these fins gently. You don't want to bend these guys. They're very fragile. And then we'll see if that improves anything. It's a little messed up. Sometimes it's good to get a little compressed air and blow it out. I don't have that ability, but what I've discovered, again, I know that a lot of people are like, don't do that, is if you soak the stuff with WD-40, then let that drain, and then drag the business card through it again. Because WD-40 is mostly kerosene, so it doesn't really leave a residue. It just mostly evaporates. So let's see if there's any improvement. Well, clearly there's a lot more work to do. Sometimes it takes a while to clean them out. I'm not going to film the whole thing because that would be boring for you to watch. But that's definitely what's causing that problem. It's mechanical, not electrical. Okay, now it's working like it should.
Are many dwelling with either day single. Thank you. My name is Brooke Taylor, in for Tim Marie, back with more here at Relevant Radio.
Very sensitive radio. Doesn't look like much, but it sure picks up pretty well. All right, the radio, as far as the electronics for working the radio, are now done. But as you guys know, I tend to add audio inputs to these guys. That way someone can listen to their music. And don't worry, they can still listen to the radio, and I'm not doing anything that cannot be undone. It's going to involve running an isolation transformer through the volume control. And then through that, a 3.5 millimeter stereo jack turned into mono, with a little tiny switch in the back that will allow the person to turn off the IF signal if they want to hear just music and not the radio. Okay, so here's how it's going to work. First of all, I saw how this goes into the cabinet, and there's some little posts down here, and I measured their height to see what maximum amount of room I have underneath the chassis. What we're going to do is we're going to add this isolation transformer, and the ratio is 120 primary, 6 volts secondary, and you want to run your audio through the secondary. This is a stereo cable, so we're going to run it through either end, right and left channel, through a pair of resistors, twist the ends of these two 33 ohm resistors together, and they go on one side of the secondary rather. This is your ground for the ground on the incoming audio. And then we have a 270K resistor and a 0.02 rated cap. Those go together in a series. And then the other side goes to ground. This goes to the top of the volume control. And the reason that we build this is it acts like a little shunt to protect the set's automatic gain control, because I find these transformers can interfere with that, so that removes that possibility. We're going to run it to the top of this volume control. This is the top. This is the bottom, I know, because it's going to the underside, the other side of the switch, which then goes through this capacitor, the safety capacitor. And we're going to mount that guy like right here on the edge. First, I'm going to assemble the components on top, and then I'm going to glue that in place and then wire it up. And we are going to have to drill one hole in the back of the metal here so that the audio cable can escape. Okay, so I was able to run the audio input through the isolation transformer. We got a little knot in the cord up here. It comes through the hole that I drilled. It goes through a grommet so you don't yank on it and make it jerk out of there. And it's working pretty well. Anyway, so we have the temporarily disconnected the signal for the IF, and there will be a switch wire that goes between the top of the pot, which is here, and this wire here. And then when the person who owns this flips the switch, they can reconnect the radio. Simple as that. I'm going to run a little wire out the back. There's already a hole drilled in the cabinet that'll fit my switch just perfectly, hence no more drilling. And we're going to run the audio cord just underneath this guy where that notch is. Alright, before I put it back together again, I'm going to wax up the case. It's actually very clean already, but the top's a little abraded. It is painted Bakelite, so I'm going to use a Carnauba car wax. Probably touch these guys up too, even though they're also very clean, so they don't need much. Just adds a nice little finishing touch. Okay, so it's working good now. I got a new shiny polish job on it. Oh, let's make sure the egg timer still works. That's really important. So, will it still ding? It still dings! And the music is coming through the Bluetooth. And if we decide we want to listen to the radio, there's a tiny little switch in the back here. Let's flip that the other way. And we get radio.
Robert Jr. the White Sox will come to bat knowing he needs to get to 28. Only 3675.
Anyway, I'm going to let it run for a few hours just to make sure that nothing's going to go wrong from all the heat that's getting generated in there. But I think this episode's finished. Until next time that a radio comes across the workbench, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.